Welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. If you're like most Americans, you spend a significant amount of your time working. In fact, we spend more time at our jobs than anywhere else. But how often do we really talk about work in America? On this podcast, the Work for Change team will. Work for Change, LLC is a team of social scientists, thought leaders, and digital storytellers who dig into the critical issues affecting American workers and workplaces today. Our podcast is co-hosted by Dr. Kendra Jason and myself, Dr. Chris Maycumber. We'll also bring guests onto the show who reflect the diversity of the American workforce. We are so excited for you to join us as we lead the efforts to humanize the workplace by building dignity and equity into jobs, work, and organizations. Please subscribe to the podcast and share us with your friends and family. You can learn more about Work for Change at workforchangellc.com.
Hello, welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast with Work for Change. I'm Kendra Jason, the founder of Work for Change LLC, a workplace equity consulting agency. Today is episode 28, and we have special guest, Alyssa McGonagle. Please, thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, so I will start off by saying that I have personal motives for having Alyssa on with us. So Alyssa is an associate professor of psychological and organizational science at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And similar to me, Alyssa focuses her research on worker health, safety, and well-being. And she really has an emphasis on promoting work ability, that's of course the ability to work, and quality of work for workers with chronic health conditions. And so I am so excited because, as you all may or may not know, I am also a researcher who focuses on the workplace and inequality and workers with chronic condition. My specific interest is older workers with chronic conditions, but I love Alyssa being here to broaden that conversation. She also has expertise in older workers as well, but chronic conditions for workers in general. So Alyssa has published her research across a lot of different mediums, a lot of different journals, such as the Journal of Applied Psychology, the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology, and others. And she's also received funding for her research from places such as the Institute on Coaching, the Sloan Foundation, and the SIOP Foundation. So again, thank you very much for being with us today, Alyssa.
Happy to be here.
All right, so I'm gonna just jump right into some questions and ask about, the workplace and chronic illness. What led you to having an interest in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started my PhD program back in 2005, I was coming from a master's program. And, just taking a step back from that, I didn't even know that I wanted to do a PhD originally. I thought I'll just go get a master's and get a job in the industry. I chose industrial organizational psychology because I'm really interested in the workplace. I had worked full-time for a few years. And so I approached my PhD not exactly knowing what I wanted to study.
Yep.
And when I got into my PhD program, the program that I chose at the University of Connecticut had just recently received some funding from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. And so they received a training grant to do training of doctoral students in occupational health psychology. And so I got into it because there was an emphasis in that program on occupational health psychology. And, it sounded interesting to me, and there was funding available for students who were interested in getting into it. And so I kind of just lucked out that I got into a program that had an emphasis on it, and that gave students opportunities financially and training wise to pursue that. Mm-hmm. And, the interesting thing is, when I started taking classes, there was a big hole in it, at least from my perspective, that none of the classes had information on workers with disabilities or chronic health conditions in the workplace. specifically. So we studied a lot of different topics related to employee safety and health and well-being. But that was really missing. There was not even one article in any of my classes that talked about it. And so I was like, well, this is really important. I know it from health issues that I've experienced personally, that I've seen other people go through.
Yep.
And so I thought that it was a great place for me to make a contribution to the literature. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, I'll just say just really quickly that OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, I remember just when I used to work at 5 years ago, we used to have OSHA come in and do the safety checks. And so most people, recognize OSHA from when they come into your business or your workplace and test and, and assess for safety and other hazards. And so it's good to know generally that they don't always just, they don't only just come in to give you a hard time, but they also are funding researchers to do this type of work where they can make those policies better. And as you say, it's really great for someone like you. So your experience is similar to mine. When I went to graduate school, when I was pursuing my PhD, I had no idea what I wanted to study. I just knew I wanted to study inequality because that was just really important to me in my life experiences and things. And so in graduate school, we had like a checklist of all the classes that we wanted to take. And so my professor was like, check all the classes, check all the classes that have interest to you. And there was like a theme. All of the classes that I chose were, of course, about inequality, but there was a second bunch about work. And I never, until that moment, realized how much I contextualized or understood or was interested in work until it was in front of me in that way. And similar to you, that is totally driven by the fact that I come from a working class family, and so work, like most families, work is central. But in working class families, work is your livelihood. It determines how much income you make, what your health care is like, how much time you spend with your family, what type of mental and physical challenges you'll have that day. And so all of those things I had this epiphany like, wow, work is so important. So I'm just really, glad that, to understand how you came into that as well. And again, I'm kind of like fangirling on you right now because you study workplaces and inequality. And so like you said, when you were, enter into this program, basically, you saw that there was this section or this discussion on disability missing. So can you just talk a little bit more about why that was important to you? And then how did you, step into that? And how did you feel stepping into that conversation to add that to, everyday discourse?
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember exactly how I noticed it. I think it was, I had a professor who was a great professor, and like a lot of great professors just asked for feedback at the end of the semester and said, what is missing from this class? Are there any topics that you think that should be covered? And I went back over the syllabus and I remembered all the readings that we did. And I was like, this is kind of strange because this is such a topic that relates to health in the workplace and well-being. And I had family members who had disabilities. And so I was thinking, this would obviously impact your experience in the workplace.
Right.
And so I mentioned it to her and she was like, yeah, you're right. This is missing. And there's not a lot of research on it. And I started looking for articles about chronic illness, disability in the workplace. And there are some, but they were at that time anyway, very few and far between. And, I think it's partially just an aspect of my personality too. It's like, I saw that there was a lot of research in certain areas and almost, in my opinion, like too much research in certain areas for me to wrap my head around. And I was like, I don't know if I can really make an impact in this one area. So just as an example, work life, that interests me a lot. And it's definitely something that I study in the context of chronic health conditions and disabilities, work-life balance issues, work-life conflict issues. But there were so many articles on work life that I was like, I don't know if I can get up to speed on this, and B, even find a place where I can make some kind of an impact, or any impact that I make is going to be really incremental, really small. So, as opposed to that, this other area of studying disabilities and chronic health issues was more wide open. And that was great for me because my interests are pretty broad. So, you can study a lot of different aspects related to that. And we can maybe get into some more of those too, if you're interested, but I don't want to veer us too much off topic, but
no, you're fine. No. This is, I think, another name for this podcast should be Off Topics. So to give folks a little bit of insight on, when you get your doctorate or your PhD, your goal is to what we call contribute to the literature. So basically, there are experts on topics, no matter what it is. It can be on pig farming. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, Alyssa is talking about, there are many experts who study the workplace, and it could be inequality, it could be healthcare access, it could be, management policies, whatever the expertise is. And so when you pursue your PhD in a particular field, your job as a young scholar, young not in age, but in experience, as a young scholar is to fill a gap. So to identify what's missing. And then to gather data or research and write on that and talk about it and make it public and accessible so that it's no longer missing. And so if you can really think about, how important Alyssa's work is, because Alyssa, so how long ago was it that you were in graduate school approximately when you got that?
So grant? I was there from about 2005 and I graduated in 2011.
Okay, so we're talking about 10 to 15 years ago, there was scant literature or scant research on chronic illness in the workplace. Now, today, there are more researchers. I'm not going to say a lot, but there are a whole lot more researchers who study chronic illness and work ability and disability. I think disability is the term that people are more familiar with, like disability in a workplace. But less than 15, definitely less than 20 years ago, no one was really talking about this, right? Now, just imagine the difference in your work experience today if you have chronic illness or pregnancy or any type of health condition that removes you or inhibits you from being 100%. So another thing, and Alyssa, you may talk about this too, is that not all illnesses are apparent. Not all disabilities have a wheelchair or a cane or an obvious cognitive difference associated with it. So we're dealing with, or we're discussing when we say chronic illness and workability is those things that you can see and also those things that you can't see. Mm-hmm. So I think Alyssa's work is really important because allow for the conversations that we have today about mental health at work, right? Because I'm assuming that the illnesses that you were studying were primarily physical, or the conversation that you were bringing in was primarily physical, or was it mental, psychological, and physical health?
Yeah, so I tend to, in the kind of historically, in my research, I've always defined chronic health conditions very broadly.
Okay.
And so that would include any mental or physical health condition that requires ongoing management in some way. So, taking medication or going to doctor's appointments or whatever, and or impairs function in some way. Yeah. So that's the definition that the CDC uses, the Centers for Disease Control.
Right.
So that includes a lot of different conditions, and it also includes conditions that may not have a diagnosed disease attached to them. So
Okay,
someone who's experiencing chronic pain,
yeah.
and that interferes with their work, or causes them some troubles with work and with managing their pain, that would be included in my research. Chronic fatigue would be as well. Those are two common ones
Oh,
that
yeah.
are maybe symptoms that may or may not be tied to a specific disease that I would put under the umbrella of what I study.
Yeah, thank you. When you said chronic fatigue and, even obesity, there are different agencies, different organizations may define obesity as a chronic health condition or illness. Others do not, right? And so the conversation even about chronic fatigue, or even more recently about depression as well, being stress, anxiety, and depression being things to consider when talking about health. All right. And so, there's a lot of things going on in the news right now. I'm following a lot, especially right now. We have the Olympics just wrapped up. And there was a lot of conversation, of course, about Simone Biles, who stepped out because eventually she said she had a case of the twisties, right, where she loses her orientation in the air, which is really dangerous for gymnastics. But early on in the conversation, it was early on, it was really a conversation about mental health, right? Because there were so many things attached to, what we know or what we think we know about her. And even with Naomi Osaka, in the same thing, where she was saying that, diagnosed or undiagnosed, we don't know. But she said, she was dealing with anxiety and depression and who knows what else. And she made a personal decision to step away from some responsibilities. So as a scholar of work, I always look at these situations not about sports, but about work. Like, this is a job that they do.
It
and
is absolutely.
These are stances that they're taking, or even conversations that they're entering into public discourse that many people frame about sports. And so they want to debate, if they should talk to the press or not, or if they should be allowed to, withdraw from the Olympics because they don't feel good. But I see it totally as a workplace or a work industry phenomenon. And so do you see things similar, or, how do you look at the world, if you will, with the lenses that you have?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was, I feel for Simone Biles and what she's gone through, but I do really appreciate the conversation that she opened up around this. Yeah. And I applaud her for putting her health first. And right. I think that when you have figures like that who are, so well known and such important figures, and they take a stance like that, it sends a strong message.
It does. Yeah.
And so I really was happy to see that, because I do think that we have a mentality sometimes here in the US where we have to power through, right?
Right.
And work comes first, and, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you're fine. And I think that when people higher up, whether it's a public figure, like you mentioned, or even a leader in an organization, or even a manager in an organization, mid-level manager, when people take a stand and publicly do these things, it signals to other people within the organization that they can also do that they can take care of their mental health. And so that was really nice to see, I think. And I really, like I said, I really appreciate them doing that and opening up that conversation.
Yeah, I think the same too with, just stepping back a few years with Michael Phelps, the prolific Olympic swimmer. And Michael Phelps dealt with some mental health challenges, but it was expressed through substance abuse. And that's what hit the news. Michael Phelps is, abusing drugs, or, and it was really a conversation about drugs and substance abuse. But what has come out later, and he talked about this again in the context of discussing Simone Biles, was that it was really about mental health. And so this link, what I really appreciate, I guess what I'm getting to, what I really appreciate is that people are more comfortable and don't feel the shame of disclosing and discussing how their physical and mental and psychological health impacts their behavior, whether it be substance abuse or anything, and then how that impacts how they're able to do their work, right? And so for so long, and I really hear this a lot, especially because in my research, I study older Black workers with chronic illness, and due to a lot of factors such as discrimination over the life course and things like that, they don't want their managers to know that they're sick. They want to be under the radar. Mm-hmm. And I really like the way that you framed it. It goes back to an American value of, we have to work hard. America is all about working hard, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, earning what you keep. And so anytime that there is a disruption of work, mm-hmm. that is really not supported in our culture in a healthy way. We kind of have a toxic relationship with anything that goes against working your hardest all the time. And I'm just glad that the conversation is shifting. Some people say it's a little softer, but whatever, it's allowing for people to take the time off, get access to resources, even if it's therapy, so that they can work through some of these things. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a benefit for the workers, right? For their own health, but it's also a benefit for the organization, because mm-hmm. if they allow workers to ask for what they need, if workers feel free to come forward and say, I need this time, or I need this accommodation, that helps the worker do their best work for the organization as well. Mm-hmm. And will, extend their longevity and allow them to work in the organization longer. So it's really, it's not all about the worker. And I think, framing it as a positive thing for organizations as well is helpful.
And so what is, I just want to echo just 1 second before that's really important, especially for researchers and other public policy folks. What we're trying to do is to fill that communication gap between workers and management, right? Because mm-hmm. often there's not honest conversations or communication between the two. And what you articulated so well is that we can fill that gap where we can help those vulnerable workers. We can help communicate for them so that their employers don't feel threatened by the fact that workers, are you seeing, like, need time off, asking for time off, asking for reasonable accommodations. It's just the trend of the workplace right now. And so it would be really smart for, at least we think, really smart for managers, supervisors, and workplaces to be proactive and to be open and to offer resources based in wellness and well-being, so that this relationship won't be so complicated. Yeah. So let me just ask you, like, what in general, like, what is the goal of your research? Like, what do you, what is the statement that you want to make, or the change that you want to, put out there as someone who's done this work?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So I really want to kind of help in a way. And mm-hmm. so a lot of my research is focused on intervention. And so implementing things that can help workers who have chronic health conditions thrive more in the workplace, have better well-being, and prolong their workability. And so, to that end, I've done some coaching studies where we looked at one-on-one coaching, and that a lot of that coaching centered around the conversations that you were just referencing. Mm-hmm. So communication is a huge part of that. And, mm-hmm. We found that having someone to help the worker reframe the situation and think of problem solving, mm-hmm. And kind of coach them in terms of how to approach their manager, those kind of things.
Right.
That was very helpful for those workers. Now that's the side of the individual worker, but the other side is intervening in the organizations, right? So training managers, training organizational leaders on not only how to structure policies and things like that, where employees with any kind of health condition will be able to thrive, but also just how to have those conversations.
Right.
How to initiate them if needed, how to respond when someone discloses a health condition or disability, how to support them without overstepping boundaries.
Yep.
So that's where my research is going in the future, in the next 5 years or so. So I'm doing some research right now where I'm interviewing managers, leaders, and HR professionals about their experiences with managing workers and where the gaps are and things like that. And pretty soon I'll be putting together a grant proposal to put together an intervention for managers, training on those very issues. And so that was kind of a long answer, but
no, it's fine.
My goal overall is intervention. I like to see the direct application of what I study. That's what drives me personally and motivates me to do my work.
Thank you, Alyssa. And, along those lines, so intervention is basically, creating policies and practices to prevent some type of negative consequence from happening. So you're building a structure so that the workplace, in this case, is easier and better and safer in different instances. And so again, Work for Change LLC is a workplace equity consulting company. And what we do is, take research that Alyssa and others do, and apply it to the workplace. And so if you are a worker who in this conversation really resonated with you, it's like, man, we don't feel like we can really talk to our bosses, or I'm not sure how to communicate, or we need this particular policy. Or if you're a manager or supervisor and says, you know what, I'm not sure where we stand on this, and I'm not sure the relationship that we have with our workers, if it's one where we can really respond to their needs. I just strongly encourage you to contact us at work4change LLC.com so that we could help you bridge that gap and make that workplace better. So I thank you again, Alyssa. This was such a fun conversation for me. I hope you enjoyed yourself as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And you're doing such important work. So I really appreciate and admire the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So for others who admire us and the work that we do, please like, subscribe, and share. We're on different medium platforms. We're on YouTube, we're on Twitter and LinkedIn. Of course, you find us here on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, and share so that we can work to make the world of work better.